that did not leave us abandoned, but rescued us from where we were, or brought us from death to life, from darkness to light. That we found favor in your eyes, God. For this we are eternally grateful. Thank you for that. God, as we look at your word this morning, would you speak in and through this Bible? Would you speak in and through this book that is the Word of God? And would you be glorified in it and in us today? And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, I hope that song was meaningful for you. It has been for us as a team. It has been for us as a family. My family and I have really enjoyed that. That the Lord has pursued us with a love that is everlasting, never-ending, and even reckless in many ways. That He has sent His own Son to come, die for our transgressions, given us new life. If there's anything that's reckless, I think it may be that, sending your own Son into the world to die for the world. And so He has. This morning, we're in the book of Ruth, chapter 2. We'll get the whole chapter today. Has anybody ever asked you to do them a favor? Can you do me a favor? They say. And you pause for a moment and you say, well, it depends on the favor. Yeah? Because we know that when we ask, can you do me a favor, there's usually some work involved. There's usually something going on where they need something. They're probably in a bind or in a spot where they need some help. And you know it's going to require something of you. And as soon as you do that favor for them, what do they say? Hey, thanks, I owe you one. Right? And then you go through the thought, yeah, okay, you owe me one, sure. We'll see if that ever comes back around, right? This is sometimes how it goes when we talk about favors. Well, today, we're going to look at, in the book of Ruth, what is the favor of God. And I think that it can expand our view of what a favor is, or what favor is. See, we view it limited in the way where we think favor is something where if I do something for you, you're going to do something back for me. I scratch your back, you'll scratch mine. With favor, we think it's like karma, where there's something coming back for me if I do something good. But in the book of Ruth, we get this picture of the favor of God that looks nothing like this concept at all. It's something completely different. It's otherworldly. And it's divine in nature. And it's something that we get to participate in, which is very exciting. So let's jump right in. Ruth chapter 2, verse 1. To catch you up on the story, if you haven't been with us, just want to let you know a little bit about what's been going on. Naomi and her husband from Israel, they moved to another country, Moab. They did this because there was a famine in their own land. And as they went, Naomi and the husband had two sons. The two sons married Moabite women. They were one big happy family until, unfortunately, the husbands all passed away. All three. The patriarch of the family as well as the two sons. And so there's great suffering for the family. And Naomi is bitter. She calls herself Mara. But she's heard that the Lord has come to the aid of His people. And as such, she wants to return back to her home. So she says to her daughters-in-law, go back to your gods, go back to your people. One of the daughters does that. The other daughter says, no, I'm following you where you go because Yahweh is where life is. And so she says, I'll go with you back to your hometown. At the end of chapter 1, she's just gotten back. She's just gotten back, and we've seen this full circle, this return home. That's the context of what we're looking at in chapter 2. Now Naomi, verse 1, had a relative on her husband's side from the clan of Elimelech, a man of standing whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor. And Naomi said to her, "Go ahead, my daughter." So she went out and began to glean in the fields behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she found herself working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. I love this opening setting that Ruth and Naomi are now back, and they're trying to figure out how to survive, what to do next. And in this, Naomi says, "Hey, go out and play the field." Not that way. She didn't mean it that way. Of course, we already understood that Naomi made it very clear where you're going. There's no husbands for you in your future. Where you're going, you're not going to find a husband. So if you're looking to find a husband, just go back to your own family. Ruth decides that she wants something greater than a husband. Sorry, all you husbands out there. There's something greater than a husband. And so Ruth decides that she wants God. I'm following you because you know where God is. But here, Naomi says, go out to the fields, right? And it's not like in our context, our modern context, saying, go play the fields. Although it's interesting that that's what she's going to go do. She's going to go to the fields and she's going to look to see if she can gather because they are in need. They want to eat, right? And as it was in the custom in this time, the fields were a place. The fields were a place where people could come. And if there were foreigners, they could come and they could gather from the edges of the fields. You've heard me talk about that before. So this is the first place where we find favor in the field. Naomi's going to go, or Ruth's going to go, and she's going to look to gather from the edges of the field. Now, this wasn't something that was just sort of like haphazard or coincidental. This was written into the very fabric of who they were as people. They were instructed as people to leave the corners of the field to be harvested by others that were in need. What does that tell you about God? That tells you that God is a person who looks out for the outcast. And God is a person who looks out, or God is a God, not a person, God is a God who looks out for the outcast. And a God who looks out for the foreigner. And is a God who looks out for the one who is in need and needs to be lifted up. And so, Ruth goes and is going to find that there are things for her to gather around the edges of the field. That's the first thing that I want you to see. God is a God who lifts up those that are in need. And Ruth is going to go out and she's going to look in the field to see if she can get the leftover grain of those that are there. And she's going to go out and she's going to look to see if she can find favor in the eyes of those who have something to give. That's what verse 2 said. Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor. Now, you may have heard somebody pray for favor before. You may have heard somebody pray, God help you to find favor in their eyes. And if you have, that's a situation walking in where you want to find God at work in that circumstance. This was the hope that Ruth had. I've come to follow Yahweh. And I'm hoping that Yahweh shows up here in this field. God, may I find favor in the eyes of those who own this field. It's an interesting question about favor. Is it something that we can seek or pursue in our lives? Is it something that we can ask the Lord to bring to us? Is it something that other people give us or something that God gives us? Such are the questions that we're looking to discover today in Ruth chapter 2. Verse 4, just then, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. Lord be with you. The Lord bless you, they called back. I love this greeting, and you've heard this greeting before, right? The Lord be with you, and also with you. Or you have another greeting that Kurtz often says, God is good, right? What do you say? All the time. God is good. There's a way of greeting one another that can indicate that we hope God's presence is here with us from the start. And this is what Boaz did going into the field. Just then Boaz arrived and he said, the Lord be with you. It was as though the first time and any time he wanted to set scene on his domain, his territory, he wanted to make sure that God was there. What would it be like if we lived our lives that way? Hey, first time I wake up in the morning, the Lord be with you, to our families, and also with you. The first time we set foot in our workplace, the Lord be with you. People might look like you're crazy. But you would know. The Lord's presence would be connected with this place. I think that that's the first thing that we see here with Boaz, is he was a person who in his field, this was his field, he wanted to make sure that God's presence was there. And the people respond by saying, the Lord bless you. In other words, there's a connection between God's presence and God's blessing. There's a connection between Emmanuel, God with us, and the blessing of God. And Boaz understood that in his field, he wanted God's presence in his field so that he could have God's blessing in his field. This was the understanding that Boaz had. And so, with this first favor that we find is in this field, in this workplace. Modern day, that might be a business. Modern day, that might be a school. Modern day, that might be a church. A place where we hope that God is working and present and blessing in what he does. Isaiah 66, verse 2 says, "Has not my hand made all these things? And so they came into being, declares the Lord. These are the ones I look on with favor, those who are humble and contrite in spirit, and who tremble at my word." Isaiah understood that God was looking on those with favor that would walk in his presence. God was looking on those with favor, those that were dwelling in his gift and in his presence and his blessing. So the first thing is this: Ruth understood that she could find favor in the field as long as it was God's field. As long as it was a place where they were going to invite God's blessing and God's presence in that place. We want to be people that do the same, looking on the fields of life with the hope that God's presence would show up. Whatever field that might be for you, whatever field of life that you might find yourself in, pray that God's presence shows up there. That God's presence and his blessing participate in what goes on, because he wants to bless. The second place we find favor is in the wings of God. We find favor in his wings. Next week, Amanda's going to talk about the wings of redemption, and I can't wait for it. This will get us primed for that. The second place that Ruth finds favor is in the wings of God. Look at verse 4 in chapter 2 of Ruth. Verse 5. He said, Lord be with you, Lord bless you. In verse 5, Boaz asked the foreman of his harvesters, whose young woman is that? Now, I'm struck by this question with my modern ears, because if we ask that question today, it wouldn't work very well, would it? It wouldn't work very well. Hey, whose young woman is that? That wouldn't fly today, would it? But such was the custom in that time. Remember, we have to read the Bible with the eyes and the ears of the time it was written. This was an old book. We're talking not only hundreds of years here, we're talking thousands of years when this was written. This is a book that has survived to tell us a story today. But in that time, who does that woman belong to? It meant, who was that woman under the care of? Who was that woman under the protection of? Who is the person that is responsible for that, the well-being of that person? That was what Boaz was getting at when he asked the question. The ironic thing is we'll come to find out that it's Boaz. He's the answer to his own question. But he doesn't know that. And so he asks, who does that woman belong to? In verse 6, the foreman replied, she is the Moabitess who came back from Moab with Naomi. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters. She went into the field and has worked steadily from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. So the foreman replies, this is Ruth, who has come back with Naomi, and all of a sudden Boaz starts to put it together, because he knows that he is related. He knows that he is the one who is caring for and protecting Naomi. And if Ruth is with Naomi, that means Boaz is to protect Ruth. Got it? And so Boaz starts to put it together here. Notice that the foreman says, Ruth has been working hard all day. In other words, Ruth wasn't just going to the field looking for handouts. Ruth was going to the field contributing. She was going to the field getting her hands dirty. She's been working hard all day because she was in need. And so Boaz finds that this is someone, he is the one who is to be protected. Verse 8, So Boaz said to Ruth, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with my servant girls. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the girls. I have told the men not to touch it. And whenever you are thirsty, go and drink from the water jars the men have filled." I love this. As soon as Boaz finds out that he's the one to be protecting Ruth. Hello. Space invaders. As soon as Boaz finds out he's the one that's to protect Ruth, he starts protecting her. Did you catch that? It didn't take him long at all, once he understood what his role was as guardian, as protector, to start getting busy protecting her. Stay here in this field, glean here, harvest here. This will be a safe place for you. I've told the men, don't think about it. How many men in this world need to be told, don't think about it? We all do. We all do. Especially in this hour, in this age, right? The movements are real, people. The movements are real. And they're needed. We as Christians, as those who walk with Yahweh, as those who walk with God, should be the first to say, this is a safe space. This is a safe place for you. Because we'll take seriously the protection of God. This is the second thing that Ruth found. Ruth found that there was favor under the wings of God. And that those that are under God's wings ought to be opening up their wings for others as well. Amen? Amen. We want a safe space for people. And so Boaz finds out that he is the caretaker, the protector, the guardian of Naomi and Ruth. And he starts to spread his wings so that Ruth can find shelter and favor there. Verse 10, at this she bowed down with her face to the ground, and she exclaimed, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?" Have you ever felt that way before? Why are you doing this? Why are you being so kind to me? Why are you being so good to me? Have you ever felt that way in your life? I think there's times like this where we see the love of God through other people, where we can see very clearly God's love on display through others when they're doing something for us that we could not otherwise understand. Why would you be doing this? This was Ruth's experience here. She says, "Why have I found favor in your eyes? That you would bless me, a foreigner." See, Ruth had in that day two things that were working against her in that day. One, she was a foreigner, and two, she was a woman. In that day, both foreigners and women found it difficult to survive and live in the places that they were in. But we see here, God is a God who cares about the foreigner and the woman. God is a God who wants to lift up the foreigner and the woman. God is a God who has people who own fields who are to open their wings and lift up the foreigner and the woman. It's right. If you are a person who finds yourself under the protection of Yahweh, then you open up your wings and you provide protection for those that are in need. It's that simple. And so we find here Boaz wanting favor in the field that he owns and favor under the wings that he has for others to find shelter. He's just mirroring God. He's just mirroring the God who protects and finds favor as well. I wanted to share with you Psalm 91:4. So if you have a second, just turn there. Psalm 91:4. If you beat into the passage, you win. Extra points. Extra points for you. Psalm 91. Let me actually read 1 through 4 for you. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. Surely He will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness shall be your shield and rampart. Isn't that a beautiful picture? This God who spreads his wings so that we might find shelter and protection and favor there. May we also be that way for those that we find that are in need of the same thing. Now that might be just somebody in your family, that might be somebody on your street, that might be somebody at your workplace, that might be somebody you don't know that you just find. God can use those moments for us to spread our wings and mirror his wings and protection. So Ruth has found favor in the field. Ruth finds favor in the wings. Look at it real quick. Verse 11, the response of Boaz. Boaz replied, I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you have left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Boaz gets it. There is an opportunity here to point to the God whose wings shelter Ruth during this time. I love a person like that who's able to say, it's not about me. I'm glad you appreciate what I've done, but it's not about me. It's about this God. He's the one who has given you protection and blessing and favor. And so Boaz points to the Lord. Again, anytime you see that L-O-R-D, that's the word Yahweh. So imagine Ruth. She's left her father and her mother in her hometown. She's left all the people behind. She's lost them or she's left them. Coming to the new town because she wants to follow Yahweh, and here she finds this man who says, may Yahweh protect you and reward you for what you've done. That's the second point here that we have. If you want to find favor in the Lord, make sure that you're under his wings. Make sure that you are serving the God who is able to lift up. Make sure that you are one who is walking under his authority. In verse 13, Ruth responds to Boaz and said, may I continue to find favor in your eyes, my Lord, she said. You have given me comfort and have spoken kindly to your servant, though I do not have the standing of one of your servant girls. Another translation there says, you put me at ease. Can we be a people who put other people at ease? It's a task, and sometimes it's difficult. But you know when you're around people like that, don't you? You know when you're around people that put you at ease. It's just easy to be in their presence. You want to hang out there. We should be that way as followers of God. We should put others at ease. They should know that it's a safe place to be with us because it's a safe place to be with God. And that will be a part of what draws them to the presence of the Lord. Let's be a people who put others at ease. Verse 14. And now we're into a third category. We will find favor in the family of God. Verse 14, at mealtime, Boaz said to her, come over here, have some bread and dip it in the wine vinegar. And when she sat down with the harvesters, he offered her some roasted grain. She ate all she wanted and had some left over. As she got up to glean, Boaz gave orders to his men, even if she gathers among the sheaves, don't embarrass her. Rather, pull out some stalks for her from the bundles and leave them from her to pick up, and don't rebuke her. I love this picture too. Ruth had no business going to eat with Boaz. No business whatsoever. If Boaz wasn't a man of God, this may not have ever happened, except for if Boaz wanted his own gain. Did you hear what I just said? This may have happened in this situation, another field, and Naomi will pick up on this later. This may have happened in another field if Boaz wanted to take advantage of Ruth. But Boaz had no intention of taking advantage. This only happened because Boaz was a man of God who wanted to spread his wings over Ruth so that she would be taken care of as well. So she comes up and she eats with Boaz, and she had all that she wanted and some left over. I love that phrase. All that she wanted and some left over. In other words, she went from being a foreigner who went to pick up the fringe parts of the field to now eating with the owner of the field and having enough, all that she wanted and some spilling over. That's the way that it is with God. When we seek the presence and the protection and the favor of God, we have all that we want and some spilling over. Our small group on Wednesday nights has been working through this book called Saturate. And I believe another small group is going to be doing this as well in the near future. Saturate, leading the disciples of Jesus Christ in everyday stuff of life. And the idea is we want to be so saturated with God that we just got stuff spilling over into everywhere else around us. That might not mean financial gain, that might not mean wealth or possessions, but it will mean that we'll have so much God working in our lives that it just spills over to other people. This was the case here with Ruth. She sat down and ate with Boaz, and she had all she wanted and some left over. What a day in the fields she has had. Yeah? And so she has all that she had wanted, some spilling over, and she's trying to figure out what do we do here with the rest that we have over. Pick up again in verse 17. So Ruth gleaned in the field until evening. Then she threshed the barley she had gathered, and it amounted to about an ephah. She carried it back to town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gathered. Ruth also brought out and gave her what she had left over after she had eaten enough. You see how it's just spilling over now for Ruth? An ephah was 10 times an omer. And omer was what you gave in an offering to the Lord. And so she had 10 times of what they would need to give in an offering. Yeah, isn't that cool? 10 times. And so she brought it home, and she had some left over, right? So what's she do with what she has left over? She gives it to Naomi. And Naomi now benefits as well. This is what the favor of the Lord is like. Verse 19. Her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed is the man who took notice of you." Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one at whose place she had been working. "The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz," she said. Verse 20, "The Lord bless him," Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. "He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead." She added, "That man is our close relative. He is one of our kinsmen redeemers." This is the first time that Ruth is told who this man is. Naomi understands. Now it all makes sense. Boaz is one of our kinsmen redeemers. You see, a kinsman redeemer in that time was a family member who would provide protection for the family. Anybody in the family, if they were ever in need, could go to this kinsman redeemer and find the help that was needed. Boaz was the one who was responsible for the family. And it all made sense to Naomi at that point. "The Lord bless him," she said, because he's continued to provide blessing for those who are living, the living and the dead. Then Ruth, verse 21, the Moabitess said, "He even said to me, 'Stay with me, my workers, until they finish harvesting all my grain.' Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, 'It will be good for you, my daughter, to go with his girls, because in someone else's field you might be harmed. Somewhere else it wouldn't have gone this way for you," she says. Verse 23, so Ruth stayed close to the servant girls of Boaz to glean until the barley and wheat harvests were finished, and she lived with her mother-in-law. Isn't this a beautiful picture? It's nearly impossible with our eyes that have now seen Christ not to go back and see Christ in this story, isn't it? Nearly impossible. The God who sent his own Son, who came and helped us in our time of need. The God who was our guardian redeemer, our kinsman redeemer, who, though we had nothing, gave us all that we could handle and some left over to give others. It's nearly impossible now that we know the story of Christ. But I'll tell you this, not everybody knows the story. Not everybody knows the story. And we can show this story not only with our words, but by the way that we live. We started out the sermon saying, "Can you do me a favor?" What would it look like if a person didn't have to ask us for the favor in the first place? What would it look like if, instead of waiting to be asked for a favor, we were a people who were seeking to give favor, the Lord's favor, everywhere we went? So that those that were in need had a solution to their problem before they even had to ask for it. This is something that our small group is also going to start thinking about. What would it look like for us to start looking around our sphere of influence and just looking for needs? Who's in need, and how can we show God's blessing and protection and favor to those that are in need? What an amazing thing this would be if we lived this way. Yes? And it's almost impossible for us now to not see Christ in this story. 1 Corinthians 6:14 says, if Christ was raised from the dead, so shall we be raised. This ministry of the Lord is a ministry of lifting others up. It's a ministry of lifting up those who are in need. And we want to be a people who participate with the Lord in that. Do you see Boaz, the guardian redeemer? God working through Boaz to show favor to Ruth. May we also be a people who are used by the Lord to show favor for those that are in need. I want to read a quote for you at the end of this. Some of you have heard that Billy Graham passed away this week, and it's sparked a reflection of his life and the way that he gave himself tirelessly for people, sharing the good news of the Lord. Well, there was this quote that I found, an article that Billy Graham had read, and it just so happened that it was right in line with what the sermon was on today. So I'll share this with you. Billy Graham said, "Your human mind, with its philosophy of an equal return for favors done, can hardly comprehend the full meaning of this grace of God. But when you catch by the inspiration of God its full meaning, you will leave the limits of human reasoning and revel in the spiritual riches of divine truth and privilege." Beautiful words from a beautiful man who had a beautiful life, and now is in the presence of beauty himself with the Lord. May we be a people who aren't seeking to be owed one when we do favors, but may we be a people who tap into the favor of God by resting in His presence, dwelling under His wings, and by being a part of His family. You want to know how to get favor in your life? The best way is to walk with God and know Jesus Christ. That might not always mean that it goes easy for you, but it means that you will have as much of God as you ever need, and then some to spill over for those that are also in need around you. Can we be a people like that today? Let's pray and we'll take communion together. God, thank you for your favor. Thank you for your blessing that comes in walking with you. Thank you that you have not left us alone, not treated us as though our sins have deserved, but you have been a God who seeks to give us unmerited blessing. You are a God who seeks to display your delight in us. May we also be a people who find delight in your presence and rest in your wings and rest in your family. God, may we be so filled with you that this favor spills around to all that are around. God, thank you that you are our guardian redeemer. You are our kinsman redeemer who has protected the family when we are in need. So we come to you, God, today, each one of us in need of your salvation. Each one of us humbly on our knees saying, God, we need you and your help and your protection and your blessing and your favor. May we be a people who, even today as we take communion, rest in you and your salvation, God. Lift us up by the power of your Spirit today. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So we'll pass communion and we hold on to it and we'll take it together at the end.